Have you ever found yourself chasing an ideal so meticulously, so relentlessly, that you wonder if you're actually building a masterpiece or just a really elaborate cage? We're told perfectionism is a virtue, a sign of discipline, a commitment to excellence. Society applauds those who settle for nothing less than the best. But what if that widely held belief is actually a profound illusion? What if, behind this relentless pursuit, there isn't strength, but a deep-seated fear? A fear not just of failure, but of something far more terrifying. The true, unbridled power that lives within you. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, didn't see perfectionism as a noble trait. Instead, he viewed it as a sophisticated mechanism of self-sabotage, a clever trick our minds play on us. Jung spoke of personas, the masks we wear for the world, carefully constructed to hide parts of ourselves we fear exposing. And often, perfectionism is that mask, an impeccable facade designed to protect us, not just from external judgment, but from the terrifying responsibility of our own inherent greatness. Imagine this. You dream of writing that book, launching your own business, making a big career pivot, or finally speaking your truth in public. You spend years studying, planning, adjusting every single detail, but you never actually start. Why? Because there's always something that isn't quite good enough. The first chapter isn't perfect. The business plan isn't solid enough. The idea still needs a few more tweaks. And just like that, days, months, even years slip through your fingers. In this scenario, perfectionism isn't about quality. It's about fear. The fear of failure, absolutely. But even deeper, it's the fear of success. Because as Jung observed, success often brings a painful revelation that you could have done so much more, so much sooner. Perfectionism keeps us in a state of what I call elegant paralysis. You're not moving forward, but you always seem busy. You're constantly working on something, always improving a detail. And all the while, you cleverly avoid confronting the most dangerous question of all. What am I truly capable of? Because the answer to that isn't just grand, it's genuinely terrifying. Discovering your own immense power means having to look back at lost time, at wasted opportunities, and at the immense responsibility that comes with wielding your true strength. It's a heavy crown to bear. Jung asserted that our shadow, the unconscious part of our psyche where desires, fears, and repressed potentials reside, often includes precisely this unrecognized greatness. And when we keep it hidden, we create perfectly acceptable justifications for not launching ourselves into the world. Perfectionism is one of the most socially valued traits. It's far more palatable to say, I haven't started because I wanted to be perfect, than to admit, I haven't started because I'm absolutely terrified of what I might become. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on this dangerous illusion. We'll explore the radical idea that perfectionism isn't a noble pursuit, but a cunning disguise to keep us small, protected, and crucially, safe from the profound discomfort of embracing our own power. Get ready for a deep dive into Jung's insights, the labyrinth of the shadow, and the unconscious mechanisms that keep millions of people stagnant, even when they feel like they're working harder than anyone else. Ultimately, this is an invitation to question a dangerous belief, that perfection is the path to freedom. What if, in reality, it's the most beautiful, most gilded of prisons? Perhaps the real question isn't, why do you want to be perfect? But rather, what are you desperately avoiding discovering about who you truly are? Under Jung's almost clinical gaze, perfectionism isn't just a mania for details or some elevated quality. From a Jungian perspective, it's a deeply rooted psychic mechanism with a very specific purpose. To shield the ego from confronting internal truths it's simply not ready to integrate. And among those truths, often, it's an individual's own immense inner power. Jung observed that humans live in a constant tension between our conscious desires and what remains unconscious. Perfectionism perfectly inhabits this liminal space, caught between the conscious desire for admiration and the unconscious terror of exposure. The obsession with doing everything flawlessly often becomes a plausible excuse to avoid concrete action, because while you're endlessly perfecting, you're not taking real risks. But there's something even deeper at play. Perfectionism feeds the persona, that social mask each of us constructs to present to the world. This mask craves acceptance, approval, recognition. For the perfectionist, the persona becomes an altar, a sacred space where everything must shine without blemish. They need the world to see them as meticulous, dedicated, and hyper-demanding of themselves. This irreproachable public image functions as a shield, and behind that shield lies what Jung called the shadow. Now, the shadow isn't just a dusty attic for our vices or shameful memories. Jung took it further, asserting that the shadow also contains our talents, our desires, our wild creative impulses, and crucially, our untapped potential. Everything that's been repressed, not because it was bad, but because it was simply too big, too overwhelming for our current ego structure to bear. That's why many perfectionists aren't just running from making mistakes. They're running from succeeding so overwhelmingly that their entire lives would demand a complete transformation. Think of someone who dreams of starting their own business. To the world, they say they're not ready yet, that they need to study more, plan better, save more money, learn more about marketing, understand people management. This discourse is perfect, socially admirable, but behind it, there might be a visceral fear of success, the fear of greater responsibilities, of other people's expectations, of being observed and judged under a new, brighter light. Perfectionism truly is a perfect alibi. It prevents you from falling, yes, but it also absolutely prevents you from flying. Jung understood that the human psyche abhors a vacuum. When you don't act in the world, the psychic energy meant for creation, achievement, and transformation turns inward, manifesting as anxiety, self-criticism, and existential crises. That's why, ironically, the more perfectionist someone becomes, the more anxious, dissatisfied, and frustrated they often feel. The psyche demands expression, and perfectionism is a gilded prison that blocks that expression. So, pursuing perfection isn't just about wanting to do things well. It's often a sophisticated unconscious maneuver to avoid the deep discomfort of confronting your own potential. Because once you recognize your own power, you can no longer hide. You must use it. And that means exposing yourself, taking risks, dealing with failure, but also with success, which, for many, is even more terrifying. But if perfectionism is, in fact, a disguise for the fear of one's own power, what exactly is this power that's so frightening? What's so devastating about recognizing our own greatness? That's what we're tackling next. Power. Isn't that what everyone says they want? To be strong, successful, capable of transforming their lives and the world. But Carl Jung compels us to look beyond the obvious. For him, the fear of one's own power isn't just real. It's one of the deepest, most paralyzing fears of the human experience. This fear arises because true personal power isn't just a source of fulfillment. It carries an immense burden of responsibility. Recognizing who you truly are implies accepting that you could have done more, gone further, created or achieved extraordinary things. And that realization can be psychologically devastating for many. Because in admitting your own power, you're forced to confront the time wasted, the opportunities missed, the dreams postponed under the convenient excuse of not being perfect yet. Jung spoke of a significant difference between what the ego consciously desires and what the self, the deepest core of our psyche, truly demands. The self calls us to individuation, to fully realize our unique potential. But this call is uncomfortable, sometimes painful, because it forces us out of our comfort zone, to shed fragile limit identities, and to face the unknown both within and outside ourselves. That's why, for many, it feels safer to remain small. Living below your potential offers a strange comfort, anonymity, and less exposure. Being truly excellent requires immense courage, not only to face external challenges, but above all, to deal with the gaze of others and the relentless judgment that often accompanies those who dare to shine. Because society, even as it claims to value genius, often subtly punishes those who stand out too much. Those who appear too great become targets of envy, suffocating expectations, or even outright hostility. Furthermore, there's the weight of your own shadow. Jung stated that everything we repress, including our greatness, ends up in the shadow, and what resides there begins to exert an unconscious influence over us. You might, without even realizing it, create situations where you sabotage your own projects, destroy promising relationships, or give up at the decisive moment, all to avoid having to bear the weight of becoming who you truly could. Because realizing your power implies having to live up to it. And that, my friends, is a gigantic demand. The fear of your own power is also linked to something Jung saw clearly: the paradoxical nature of human beings. Within each of us exists both the fierce desire for freedom and the equally potent fear of that freedom. The longing for greatness coexists alongside the desire to remain protected, hidden, safely out of the risk of failing, or, just as frightening, triumphing. Because once you recognize what you're capable of, you can no longer claim ignorance. There are no more excuses for inertia. The call of the self becomes deafening. And this is precisely where perfectionism plays its starring role. It becomes the trench where you hide, avoiding the profound inner call. As long as you're busy seeking the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect text, you can sidestep the anguish of truly engaging with your own creative strength. Perfection, then, is the most acceptable alibi for remaining small. But if all of this is hidden in the depths of our psyche, where exactly does this feared strength reside? Where is this power that, according to Jung, inhabits our shadow and can, at the same time, destroy or liberate us? To answer that, we need to enter the darkest, most fascinating territory of the human mind, the shadow itself. And that's exactly what we're unpacking next. To truly grasp why so many perfectionists remain trapped in endless cycles of idealization and immobility, we have to delve into one of Carl Jung's most fascinating and, frankly, disturbing concepts: the shadow. And when we talk about the perfectionist's shadow, we're not just talking about flaws, vices, or ugly thoughts. We're primarily talking about repressed potential, hidden desires, and fears so deep they often don't even reach our conscious awareness. Jung defined the shadow as everything the individual does not wish to be, but which nonetheless is. These are aspects, qualities, impulses, abilities, and feelings that have been banished from consciousness because they simply didn't fit the socially acceptable image, the persona, that each of us meticulously constructs. In the case of the perfectionist, the persona is impeccable, disciplined, detail-oriented, always pursuing excellence. But behind this pristine facade, the shadow may contain precisely the opposite: fear, insecurity, anger, envy, and ironically, also grand talents that have been repressed for seeming too excessive or too threatening. For Jung, repressing the shadow doesn't make it disappear. Quite the opposite. Everything that's denied and banished to the unconscious only becomes more powerful, exerting a silent, often insidious influence over our thoughts, behaviors, and decisions. Perfectionism, then, can be seen as a highly sophisticated defense mechanism. By maintaining an obsessive focus on details, you keep the shadow safely locked away, preventing its contents from surfacing and forcing you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. Here's the paradox. The perfectionist believes they're in control, working hard to achieve the best possible outcome. But in reality, they're being controlled. Controlled by the fear residing in their shadow, controlled by the anxiety of exposing themselves, of being criticized, of shining too brightly, or failing spectacularly. It's as if perfectionism is a protective wall. Only, at the same time, this wall also becomes a prison. Within the perfectionist's shadow dwell not only the flaws they fear to show, but also their greatness. Many don't realize that the greater fear isn't of making mistakes, it's of hitting the mark perfectly. Because realizing your full potential means launching yourself into the world without shields. It means dealing with envy, the weight of expectations, and the ongoing demand to maintain results. And above all, it means having to acknowledge that all the time spent hiding was, in part, a precious, irreplaceable waste. Jung believed there's immense life force in the shadow. Everything we repress, our talents, creativity, boldness, remains there, accumulating energy. This energy, not finding a healthy outlet for expression, begins to manifest dysfunctionally. Chronic anxiety, panic attacks, compulsions, extreme procrastination. That's why many perfectionists live in a permanent state of tension. They carry within them a dormant volcano ready to erupt. And there's something even more unsettling. The shadow doesn't just reveal itself in moments of crisis. It infiltrates the small choices of daily life. In an email that takes hours to write because it's never good enough. In a project that's never launched. In a relationship that ends before it even truly begins, out of fear of not being perfect in the eyes of the other. The shadow silently sabotages every step, while the perfectionist maintains the illusion of merely waiting for the right moment. Deep down, perfectionism is an unconscious strategy to avoid contact with this shadow, because facing it means admitting hard truths, that you're hiding from your own potential, that fear paralyzes you more than any imperfection ever could, and that as long as perfectionism seems noble, no one will force you to change. But there's an immense cost to keeping the shadow locked away. And this cost manifests in very concrete ways in the emotional, professional, and existential life of the perfectionist. What are these devastating consequences? What happens when someone lives enslaved by this destructive dynamic? That's what we'll explore in the next section. Perfectionism, seen from the outside, often looks like a virtue. Many associate it with the relentless pursuit of excellence, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to impeccable results. But those who live within this armor know the psychological cost is devastating. For Carl Jung, everything that's kept repressed or unlived exacts a price. In the case of the perfectionist, that cost often manifests as chronic anxiety, debilitating guilt, paralyzing inaction, and a deeply dissatisfied life, despite often appearing wildly successful to the outside world. One of the greatest traps of perfectionism is the constant illusion of being almost ready. You're always one step away from starting, from launching, from truly exposing yourself. But you never quite get there. This eternal wait for the perfect moment drains your vital energy. Jung called this psychic stagnation. The energy meant for action, creation, and transformation gets trapped in an internal whirlpool, spinning without finding an outlet. That's why many perfectionists live utterly exhausted, even when they seem to be doing nothing concrete. There's also the deep, gnawing suffering caused by relentless self-criticism. The perfectionist not only strives to do everything impeccably, they torment themselves for every minimal, real, or imagined failure. Small mistakes balloon into internal catastrophes, eroding self-esteem. Jung warned that the ego, when hypertrophied and overly identified with the persona, this perfect social image, simply cannot tolerate imperfections, because each perceived failure threatens the very identity built with so much effort. The result is an individual who lives in constant fear of being unmasked, as if at any moment everyone will discover they're not as competent, intelligent, or disciplined as they appear. But perhaps the highest cost of perfectionism is existential. Jung said that living below one's potential inevitably generates suffering. The perfectionist might even gain external recognition, but they often carry a hollow sense of emptiness inside. They constantly feel they're falling short of what they could have been. The problem is, admitting this would mean accepting that years, sometimes decades, have been tragically wasted in the name of an impossible ideal. And this awareness is so painful that many prefer to remain in the cycle of eternal improvement, even knowing, on some deep level, that they're sabotaging themselves. Another devastating consequence of perfectionism is the toxic relationship with failure. The perfectionist doesn't see mistakes as learning opportunities. They see them as undeniable proof of inadequacy. Each failure is experienced as a mortal blow to their very identity. This generates a paralyzing fear. After all, if everything must be perfect, any misstep is utterly unacceptable. This mindset hinders not only personal growth but also true creativity, because innovating means experimenting, taking risks, and accepting that many attempts will inevitably be imperfect. There's also the impact on relationships. The perfectionist isn't just demanding of themselves. They often project their impossibly high expectations onto others. Partners, co-workers, friends, everyone ends up being measured by the same unforgiving yardstick of perfection. This creates distance, conflicts, and a chronic feeling of loneliness. Because, deep down, no one can meet such rigid standards, not even the perfectionists themselves. In his profound work, The Undiscovered Self, Jung warns that the modern individual, by losing contact with their true self, becomes vulnerable to external pressures and ends up living according to others' expectations. The perfectionist is a living embodiment of this. They're so busy trying to maintain that impeccable mask that they completely disconnect from who they really are. And in this process, they become increasingly vulnerable to identity crises, anxiety, and even depression. However, Jung also believed that there's a way out. But it doesn't lie in forcefully destroying perfectionism, nor in simply accepting mediocrity. The solution is something much deeper: to recognize, integrate, and transform the immense energy that is currently trapped in this destructive cycle. Because what currently imprisons you can, when brought to consciousness, become powerful fuel for a much more authentic, vibrant life. But how do we break this cycle? How do we use our own imperfection as a path to freedom, rather than continued imprisonment? To answer this, we need to understand how Jung viewed the actual journey to overcoming these patterns, and how we can, practically, begin to break free from this beautiful but deadly golden prison. That's what we'll discuss next. Before we dive into those practical steps, a quick word. If what you're hearing today truly resonates, if you're ready to go deeper, you'll find incredible value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas into actionable insights, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a clear 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment below. If there's one thing that truly differentiates Carl Jung from so many other psychological thinkers, it's his radically transformative view of human suffering. For Jung, symptoms like anxiety, compulsions, or mental blocks aren't just problems to be eliminated. They're messages from the unconscious. They are urgent invitations, sometimes brutal ones, for you to discover something absolutely essential about yourself. In the case of perfectionism, the message is crystal clear. There's an inner power being suffocated. There's an unlived life demanding to finally surface. Jung didn't view perfectionism as a moral flaw. He understood it as a legitimate psychic defense, skillfully created to protect the ego from confronting internal contents that still felt too vast, too dangerous to be faced head-on. But he also warned that if this defense crystallizes, it transforms into a prison. And the key to escaping this prison lies in the profound process he called individuation. Individuation in Jungian thought, is the lifelong path by which you become what you truly are in essence. It's the process of integrating all parts of your psyche, including those repressed, denied, or projected onto others. And here's the crucial point. For Jung, the goal isn't to eliminate the shadow or forcefully rid yourself of perfectionism. It's to integrate, to transform, to make the energies that were once blocked now serve your conscious, authentic life. In the case of the perfectionist, this means recognizing that the drive for excellence isn't, in itself, something bad. The desire to do well can be an extraordinary force, capable of generating valuable works, bold projects, impressive achievements. The problem arises when this force becomes tyrannical, demanding absolute perfection, and critically paralyzing action. The Jungian path, therefore, isn't to destroy perfectionism, but to transform it from something rigid and paralyzing into something flexible, dynamic, and profoundly creative. Jung believed this process begins with an act of immense courage, looking directly at your shadow, asking yourself, without any masks, what am I really avoiding by seeking perfection so intensely? For many, the answer is devastating. They're avoiding discovering what they are truly capable of. They're avoiding the profound responsibility of using their talent, their unique voice, their authentic power. Because shining requires paying the price of exposure, judgment, and above all, an unwavering commitment to your own greatness. Another central aspect of Jungian thought is the radical importance of accepting imperfection as an integral part of the creative process. Jung asserted that growth occurs in the territory of error, of trying, of learning. Those who wait to be perfect before acting never accomplish anything truly significant, because perfection is, by nature, unattainable. And it's precisely this impossibility that the perfectionist cannot bear to admit. There's a powerful excerpt from Jungian thought that perfectly encapsulates this idea. Freedom begins the moment you accept that your first attempt will be imperfect. Freedom is born when you accept that your first draft will be messy, that your first video won't be brilliant, that your first attempt might absolutely flop. And that's okay. It is in this space of acknowledged imperfection that true creativity resides. It is there that original ideas, groundbreaking innovations, and authentic works carrying your unique, undeniable mark are found. But Jung didn't limit himself to theoretical insights. He also pointed to practical ways to begin this transformation. One of them is dialogue with the shadow. Instead of repressing imperfect thoughts, you can write them down, reflect on them, and ask yourself, what's truly valid in each fear I'm feeling? Another way is to start small, to act even when the feeling of being ready doesn't exist, to do something today, even if it's imperfect, because paradoxically, it is in imperfect action that the psyche is liberated. The great truth is that no process of individuation is comfortable. It requires immense courage to admit that much of your perfectionism is, at its core, fear. It requires profound humility to accept your own fallible humanity. But according to Jung, only this path leads to an authentic life, and more than that, to a life brimming with genuine meaning. However, knowing all this intellectually is not enough. It's necessary to bring these powerful ideas into the concrete, messy reality of everyday life. How, in practice, can someone truly begin to break the cycle of perfectionism? How is this newfound courage implemented in your real life? That's exactly what we'll explore in the final part, where we'll reveal practical strategies to transform your imperfection into powerful fuel for authentic action. After delving into the deepest recesses of the human psyche, perhaps the most important question for many of you remains, what do I do now? Because intellectually understanding that perfectionism is a form of fear isn't enough. Knowing there's a latent power hidden beneath layers of demanding self-criticism is also insufficient. Action is required. It's time to bring everything Jung taught us about individuation, the shadow, and integration into your daily reality. Here's the simple, yet often painful truth. As long as you're waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect idea, or the perfect execution, life will keep passing you by. Perfectionism robs you not only of external opportunities, but also of the precious chance to discover who you truly are. Jung said that suffering arises not from living a difficult life, but from living a life that is not yours. Perfectionism, in this sense, is an elegant trap that keeps millions of people stuck in small, safe, and deeply unsatisfying existences. So, how do we begin to shatter this cycle? Here are some concrete practices inspired by both Jungian psychology and modern applied techniques. First, act before you are ready. The initial impulse should come from action, not endless rumination. If you're writing a text, finish that first draft without agoning over its perfection. If you have a project, launch a minimum viable product, even if it's not the final version. Jung believed that the self can only fully emerge when it's lived in the real world, not just contemplated in your mind. Second, set clear, uncomfortable limits for preparation. Give yourself a short, almost ridiculously tight deadline to plan. Then, commit to acting. Because each additional day spent in the preparation phase only feeds the illusion that you're still not good enough. Perfection isn't in endless preparation. It's in the courage to correct as you go. Third, start to dialogue with your shadow. When you feel fear, shame, or blockage, instead of fleeing, sit down and write. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of here? What's the worst that could happen if I do this imperfectly? Often, just naming the fear, bringing it into the light, significantly diminishes its power. Fourth, accept that the first version of anything will be imperfect, and that's okay. Jung said that psychic energy needs to flow. When we block it, it inevitably turns into anguish. It is infinitely better to produce something imperfect than to remain endlessly paralyzed. Fifth, develop small, conscious victories against perfectionism. Choose something simple to do deliberately in a good enough way. It could be writing an email without obsessively rereading it, recording a short video without dozens of retakes, or simply allowing yourself to submit something that's 80% ready. Each victory of this kind creates new neural pathways that actively challenge the paralysis cycle. Finally, remember this profound truth. Imperfect action always outweighs perfect inaction. This is one of the greatest truths that Jung indirectly bequeathed to us. We are transformed, not by thought alone, but by our actions in the world. Perfectionism makes it seem like you're being careful, discerning, responsible. But often, it's just fear dressed up as virtue. And this fear, if left unexamined, will steal years from your life, your talents, and the incredible impact you could have on the world. Jung calls us to something much greater, to be whole, even in our imperfection, because it is precisely in the vulnerability of real messy action that our true power resides. So, here's my invitation to you. What are you postponing in the name of perfection? Share it in the comments below. Talk about that project you're waiting to finish, that idea stuck on paper, or that specific fear that paralyzes you. Shine a light on your shadow. You'll quickly realize that you are absolutely not alone. And if this video has sparked deep reflections for you, make sure to continue watching the next video on the channel. It's also an important piece of this puzzle, because each insight forms the path to something truly greater, the liberation of your own authentic greatness.